Hello, everybody. Digital Warrior here. Today we're talking about all things Project 2025. We're here looking at understandingproject2025.com, website I created to sort of help educate people about the various aspects of Project 2025. And what I've done is I've broken it down in various areas. Here's some of the key players, strategies that I included. Now, I know heritage is the main driver of this, but there are some players that are also involved that and some strategies that they're using that are really important to know, and they're not often talked about. Like Atlas Network is one of those organizations that is the right-wing think tank based in the United States, but they are the master think tank, and they've got 600 think tanks underneath them, of which Heritage is one of them. So they all work together. These right-wing think tanks work together, and I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of Atlas Network, and I will probably do something more about them in the future. And the strategy that they use is these things called donor advised funds, and this is in a nutshell, these wealthy people donate money to these entities. They're donor advised funds where they're able to take a tax benefit credit for it and do these nefarious things to fund these think tanks, to fund these different strategies, and they get a tax break. So they're using our tax system against us to destroy democracy. So if it's something you're interested in, you should dig in a little deeper into this donor advised funds, and it has a great little resource tools, etc. So you can find additional articles and whatnot down at the bottom about donor advised funds. This is something that's really significant, and I think that Democrats, progressives, should definitely consider doing the same thing themselves. So here's some additional articles to research about what these donor advised funds are all about. And then I also created a AI generated podcast with associated notes so that you could sort of understand more about those in more friendly format. I like to learn that way. So I like to drive and listen and learn. So it might be a benefit to other people. So I have it available for you if you want to look at it. So I've broken the Project 2025 down in a couple areas, and there might be more clearly, but I just tried to do a brief summary of the main areas. You know what he's doing in abortion rights. He's not made any attempts yet, but we suspect that's going to be coming. Climate crisis, they got rid of all of Biden's climate initiatives, which is hurting people across the country, and it's going to set us back a long time. Discrimination, they essentially made it legal to discriminate against people again, and now the discrimination is discrimination against white people. So go figure. Government benefits, we know that they're planning to cut $880 billion from Medicaid. Medicaid is the services that people get that provide benefits for disabled kids, provide respite care, provide work education, work assistance. They provide seniors with assisted living facilities. They pay all that. And that's going to go away because they want to give a $1 trillion tax cut for the billionaires. Not for us, but for the billionaires. That's why they're going to cut these benefits that benefit so many people. And they're going to cut $220 million from SNAP benefits. So the people who are the most vulnerable, the ones who are relying on these SNAP benefits, are going to be harmed as well. Now, we know what they're doing with immigration. We know what they're doing with independent media. They're just trying to put the squeeze on everybody. So anyhow, you can go through some of these different areas and see what's going on, what additional information might be there for you. One of the things that I've wanted to do, and I hope that someone who sees this reaches out to me, in my handle on Blue Sky, which is where I'm really staying mostly at now, is Digital Warrior at Blue Sky. I'm also Digital Warfare 1 on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it, but I prefer that you reach out to me on Digital Warrior on Blue Sky. And let me know. One of the things I think we really need to do is divvy up the work. What I mean by that is this project, 920 pages of the Project 2025, is a huge endeavor, and it is a lot for any one person to try to cover all of it. And besides, not all of us have a strong interest in every aspect of it, but we have a strong interest in some aspects of it. So I'm just encouraging people who want to work on this project with me is, why don't we divvy up the work? I'm really interested in government benefits as it relates to how they're going to cut, how it's going to impact people. I'm also interested in the rule of law, how that's going to play out. But I'm not so interested in maybe immigration or discrimination, for example, because I know other people are taking up those charges. But if you have areas that you have an interest in, reach out to me and let's divvy up the work, and you become an expert and you update me when we need to know about something, and we'll try to do the same with you, and we can just share our resources and share our mental capacity. So anyhow, I just wanted to throw that out there to people. Go visit the site and see what you can learn. Um, oh, I had created a AI chatbot that was an expert on Project 2025, but Google told me I had to take it down because I don't know why. They don't ever give me a reason. They said that it violated their terms and conditions. And if you want a full copy of it, here is the full copy of Project 2025. There's some interesting videos that I thought were pretty interesting. And I was using these to hand out to people during the election to let people know that they can go use this QR code to go to this page to learn more about Project 2025. So what precipitated this effort today? I saw this the other day coming out from Bucks County Beacon. Now, if you don't know who Bucks County Beacon is, you're like, who are these people? This isn't the New York Times. This isn't the Washington Post. These guys put out some good stuff. This is the same place that Jenny Cohen, the one who writes a lot about, the attorney who writes a lot about Christian nationalism and stuff like that, she writes here as well. So Bucks County Beacon is a player, and I give him full credit and respect. When I saw this, I knew it was going to be a serious reporting, and it is, because I did not know about it. Nobody's reporting about it that I've seen. But ALEC, the legislative, I can't remember off the top of my head, it is, publishes, they're the big ones who do all the policy guidelines for the Republican Party in the state houses. So they, and I'll show you in a second, they go around and they tell the Republican legislators what they want passed, and they even have the sample language that they could use as the bill, and that's how they get a lot of stuff done. And I don't know why we aren't doing that more aggressively. Maybe we do have Democratic groups that are doing it, but I'm just not aware of them. But either way, we're learning from what the Republicans doing, and we need to emulate what they do well and do it better. But this is an effort that Republicans have been using for a while. I think since 1973, these guys have been around. So anyhow, Colleen Scarpella wrote this just a couple days ago on Valentine's Day. And here is the essential policy decisions or solutions that is from ALEC. This is their Project 2025, and thank the Lord it's not 920 pages. I think it's only 48 pages, and we're not going to go over all 48 pages. So it's just going to give you a snapshot, and we're going to dig a little deeper in a couple questions that I wanted to get answered here today. And I'll check the chat to see if anybody else has any questions and answers. But this article is what caught my attention, and I said, they are up to no good. They are trying to deploy Project 2025 at a state level. And some would say, and I would not argue against, some would say that they've already been doing that, like in Missouri, Tennessee, Texas, Florida. All the states that are completely controlled by Republican are essentially locked down Project 2025 states. The people don't always have the ability to seek redress. Some of these states don't even allow citizen-led initiatives. So they are locking people down in a show of illiberalism that really exemplifies the Republican Party today. So I don't have much good to say about that, but every time Republicans have the ability to lock down a state, they do. They don't do it with better policies or better ideas. They just do it because they can. So this talks a little bit about the symmetry between the Trump campaign and ALEC. ALEC has been working with Project 2025 Heritage Foundation people to help craft it. So they're very well entrenched with what is going on with Project 2025. There are some variances between the two because it's at the state level, but there's not really a call for immigration, for example, at the state level. But um, everything else they're doing in alignment. And we're going to cover some of those in a second. The top, from what I can read and what I understand, the top policy objectives of ALEC, etc. So let's see. Here is the document of ALEC, the Project 2025, if you will, document. And let's take a look. Yeah. This page, I have to keep it large for us people with bad vision. I'm not going to go over all these. I'm just going to, this is sort of like their areas of focus, right? Economic competitiveness, whatever, however they define that, education freedom, which is essentially, charter voucher schools, taking money from public schools, undermining them, trying to break up the separation from church and state so that they can indoctrinate children in the future. Just a lot of things that they're doing here. Functional federalism. Now, federalism, for those who may not know it, is defined as federalism is states' rights, essentially. They're saying that the states have their own rights, their own jurisdiction, which is true, and they should. But I noticed things about conservatives is that they're cool with states' rights when they control the states, not so cool when they don't. Like, for example, I think in the last Supreme Court session, New York had passed legislation that said that they wanted to keep their citizens safe with some gun safety measures, and the Supreme Court said and struck it down. So they struck down New York's ability to protect its own citizens, even though it was a state issue. The state legislature had passed it and the governor had signed it. The Supreme Court, who is supposedly originalist and all that nonsense, they are only originalists when it suits them. After that, they are, fly by the seat of the pantsist, if that's anything that you could say. So functional for protecting individual freedom, building better communities. Now, I know one of the things that they talk about is under education freedom, for example, they want free speech on campuses. What they want is to be able to force their unpopular opinions down the throat of people who may not necessarily want to hear it. So they just want free space to go out and say whatever they want to say, including hate speech. They're okay with anything as long as it gives them the power that they're seeking. So let's take a look at some of these. Oh, effective local government, international relations, healthcare. Essentially, they want to get away with get rid of the Affordable Care Act, and to leave it to the states and leave it to private industries to provide. Sorry about that. I've been fighting off something. To allow the individual industry to regulate itself as it relates to healthcare. Now, we all know how that's going to turn out. We're going to have pre-existing conditions again. We're going to have kids who have disabilities disqualified, especially when they get rid of Medicaid that they're doing and that they're already currently trying to do right now. There's legislation that's in the Senate that passes. The president will sign it, and Medicaid, as we know it, will completely be eviscerated. So then it's going to get worse. So now you have private sector businesses who have the ability to discriminate against you for your health condition, discriminate against you for being a woman or being pregnant, discriminate against you for all kinds of things, and charge you more for it. So they only want to ensure the super healthy until they get not healthy, and then they want to be able to kick them off. And that's what ALEC really stands for. So let's take a look at education freedom, for example. So how this document is formulated, you see all the blue pages over here. This is the header for that section. And then the next part is a brief description of what they say they're doing. Now, the thing about these is, remember, this is a document internally. It is not necessarily a truthful document in terms of their allegations. Like, for example, they might say the Biden administration, was too woke or some nonsense like that. That's not a factual statement, but they use that kind of language throughout. it caters to their base, that caters to their politics and propaganda that they spew, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. You saw the same thing in Project 2025. These statements of fact that weren't in fact facts, but catered to their base. So then you have something called a model policy, and this is what they prepare. You have these wealthy billionaires like the DeVos family, Betsy DeVos. I don't know how you pronounce it, DeVos, I think. She was the previous education secretary, who's very wealthy, and she uses her money to influence legislation. So she's a big funder of these kinds of projects to affect how kids are taught, and to affect the types of things that they're taught, the types of things that they become aware of through their education. So these guys are seen and are playing a long term, meaning they are looking at this over generations. These people have been working on this project to dismantle democracy for 30, 40, 50 years. Maybe some would argue longer than that. So this is not something that is going to go away. It's not going to go away in one election or two elections. We need to create our own infrastructure to defeat this, and we need to prepare the next generations to step up when we're no longer here to do it. So right now we're just getting the lay of the land of what they're trying to accomplish. And I saw this effort to do at the state level what they're doing at the federal level. So let me take a quick drink real quick. Sorry about that. So if you go to like the Hope Scholarship, for example. So here's the language. So a legislature in Tennessee or Kentucky or wherever they're at could just cut and paste, submit it to their clerk and get it passed, and it becomes the law of the land. Do you see the power in that? That the wealthy have a fast track directly to their legislators with pre-written legislation that they are trying to push through. Now remember, these wealthy people would not likely be able to pass this legislation if they didn't have this kind of system set up, because the Republican legislators, and you saw it in Texas in the most recent election, they are under so much pressure to perform for these wealthy people that they sort of do a little dance that, the wealthy says, you will do this or we'll primary you. You saw Elon threatening everybody recently to either approve these unqualified cabinet nominees, or he's going to spend up to $200 million to primary you. And every single senator or Republican congressperson fell in line. Well, the senators and confirmations, obviously, they all fell in line. Now, I sort of knew that was going to happen, but I'm really proud of the Democrats for putting up some kind of fight in those areas, as opposed to laying down, which it looked like they were going to do for a while. I was not pleased that some of them were approving or voting for some of these people who were clearly problematic, like JFK and Tulsi Gabbard and others. So anyhow, that's how this works with these guys. They provide the sample policies, and they make it, and then they go out and lobby, and they go and talk to people, and then they demand that these things get done. So that's it in a nutshell. Now I'm going to take a quick look to see if we have any questions coming in, because I don't see this, and forgive me, I'm not super awesome at this, but I'm going to see. Okay. No comments yet. So if you have any questions, go ahead and enter them in there, and I will hopefully get back to it and get them answered as best I can. So what I did also, I'll talk about this real quick, because they do talk about this. This is, some would argue, not a long shot. Some would argue could potentially be a long shot. But one of the efforts that the conservatives have been really working towards through over the last 10, 20 years is trying to convene a constitutional convention. And there's arguments to say that they may have the requisite number of states, because some states have approved it once and maybe have gotten rid of it with later legislators. And I think the argument's being said that, because they approved it once, that's conditions been met. But given this Supreme Court, given this Congress, I just don't know. I think we're going to put up a fight if they try to push this through and say that it's the conditions have been met. Because if they do convene a constitutional convention, that means they can rewrite everything. They can write out LGBT people and trans people. They can take away a woman's rights to vote, completely revamp the our civil rights, get rid of them because they don't like them. They could do all kinds of things if they have the votes to get it done. So they think they might be able to do it. I think it's something that's going to be coming our way if we cannot dislodge the House, at least the House, in maybe in these coming special elections in Florida. I think April 1, I think, is when they're coming up. So if we're able to dislodge at least one of the houses, then we might be able to save ourselves from even having to consider this. But if we cannot, this is something that I know that they are thinking about trying to deploy against us. So, and if you don't know what that is, it's just the Constitutional Convention is the ability to completely rewrite the Constitution. All the things that they think were wrong, they could try to fix. So, well, I don't want to say fix, but it's wrong. They think it's wrong because, they don't want black people having rights. They don't want women having rights. They don't want anybody having rights that is not white and wealthy. Okay, so I'm going to move on to this. So what I did is, this is Google LM. I really love this product because I'm an audio learner because I have such bad vision. So I like to drive or ride my bike or whatever I'm doing and listen to content. So what I do is I put in information and then I sort of save it as an audio file, and then I listen to it, and then I take notes about it later on. So so right now in this product, Google LM, I have the article that I showed you before, which is this one. And I have the full policy editions, which is this one. So that gives me the ability to inquire of those documents various questions. So I've got some questions I got lined up. So give me a second, and we'll see what it says. So paste that. What are the most alarming policy proposals in ALEC's 2025 blueprint, and how do they align with Project 2025's federal level goals at the federal level? Let's see what it says. Now, the cool thing about this is it is coming directly from these sources here. So, for example, this tells you here that here's where it's at. So if I click on that, I don't want to do it because it might do something with my screen, but I'm just telling you that that's how it works. So then you have the source here that supports what they're saying here. So functional federalism, they want federalism when it benefits them. They want, they want the state, the federal agency, federal government to control the states that they can't control. So it's it's federalism for me and not for thee. So I can imagine them trying to control California and New York by the Supreme Court, but all the states that are Republican controlled would be effectively able to do their own things with no ability by a Democratic president or Congress to do anything to stop them. So I sort of see that as their future. Voting rights. Obviously, Republicans love to disenfranchise people. There was reporting by, I think, Greg Palast that they disenfranchised 4.6 million people in the most recent election in 2024. That is a very high likelihood of why Vice President did not win, because they were disenfranchising people. People would go to the polls and they'd find out that they had been kicked off the poll booth, or somebody they didn't even know challenged their right to vote. Like in Georgia, there was almost 1 million people who challenged their vote. And in Georgia, you had to physically attend a hearing. Not you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it remotely. You had to physically go, and if you couldn't go, you could not vote. And the other thing that they're trying to get rid of because they don't like the outcomes is they want to get rid of ranked choice voting. I know in Maine they have it, and I know in Alaska they have it. In Alaska, if you recall, 2 elections ago, there was a special election, or maybe it wasn't special, but it was an election in Alaska, and there was 2 Republicans running, Sarah Palin and somebody else, and then the Democrat who ended up winning. So the 2 Republicans sort of, and then in ranked choice voting, and I'm not an expert in this, so this is memory. So if someone tells me I'm wrong in the notes, comments, feel free. But as I understand it, ranked choice voting says you pick your first 2 candidates, and if the first candidate, the top performing candidate does not get over 50% of the votes, then it goes to the second person, and the third person who was in that scenario gets kicked off. So now it's whoever has the most votes out of those 2 that are still remaining. So that's the same thing. So her name was Mary something or other who won in Alaska. So Republicans were up in arms because if only one of those Republicans would have ran, then very likely they would have won that seat. And the argument for ranked choice voting, and I can see how this works, is since you don't know who's going to be your 2 vote, you sort of gotta moderate your positions. You can't be a complete jerk. Like Republicans can be complete jerks because all they have to worry about is being primaried from their right. If they're not jerky enough, then someone's going to come over and say, hey, I will be more of a jerk. I will be more Trump-like than you are. Therefore, you are a rhino. So I'm going to, but in ranked choice voting, that's not the case. You have to cater also to the center or even more progressive side. You can't just be a complete jerk because you won't be the number 2 vote and you won't get elected. I personally think, from what I know, ranked choice voting should be deployed nationwide. Think about de-escalating all the animosity between the parties relative to their candidates. And I say this honestly and fairly, it is primarily a function of Republican Party, not so much on the Democratic Party, although there is some, but it's not to the same degree. Undermining public education. This is an ongoing goal, objective of these guys. They do not want a well-informed, educated young people. They want them to be automatons to where they just say yes. And I don't want to learn anything. I just want to go get a job at 16, 17, 18, so that the wealthy can have a low-cost labor pool of people who vote against their own interests. We see that happening all over the place. They do not want an educated, critically thinking population of young people. They want them listening to their lies that they spread on right-wing media and not educated and have the ability to critically evaluate that. Obviously, they want to bust unions. They want to bust unions and do something called the Union Recertification Act. I believe it's an act that requires unions to recertify regularly, and if they don't get a certain percentage, then it automatically disqualifies the union. So it puts this onus on the union to continually always be keeping people 100% satisfied, which sounds good, but that's not the reason they're doing it. They're doing it so eventually there'll be some slippage, and eventually the union will be disbanded, which is really what they want. And that's why they have all those right to work states, which sounds good, but really it's a way to undermine the union's ability to organize, but because it does not mandate that someone who benefits from the union be in the union. So you could benefit from what the union's doing but not pay any dues. So some people would opt to benefit what they're doing but not have to pay their annual or monthly dues. So that's just an undermined way to do it. Deregulation, they say that they want to have up to 35% deregulation. That's just like random. Every time they do deregulation, there's always some reason they shouldn't have done it, right? We see all these accidents, these occurrences. We see food safety. We see all these things happening because of all the deregulation. These big corporations do not give one rat's ass about any of us. They care about profits and profitability. That's it. So when they talk about deregulation, they're talking about they just want to be able to make more money without having to worry about our safety. And that is a terrible thing. Some deregulation may make sense. Maybe there's some over-regulation. I don't know. Um, And of course, they want to protect the fossil fuel industry because that's important to them. They want to keep that money rolling in, and tax cuts for the wealthy and the corporations. If you read recently about the most recent budget bill that the Republicans passed, where they told everybody when the election was going on that they were going to not tax Social Security, not tax tips, and all that kind of stuff. But guess what? When that bill went through, none of that stuff was in there. The only thing that was in there is tax cuts for the wealthy, billionaires, corporations, which is what Democrats have been telling MAGA forever. They don't care about you one iota, and this proves it. So we're 6 weeks into this Trump administration. They've done absolutely nothing to make our prices go down. Grocery prices are still going up. Gas prices are going up. The stock market is dropping. And all they're doing is talking about tax cuts for the wealthy. You remember that, MAGA. You've been had. You've been lied to, and you should own up to that. He's cutting your he's cutting your Medicaid so that your kids with disabilities and seniors, your parents who are living in an assisted living facility, are going to have to move in with you. They have their eyes on Social Security and Medicare. In Medicare, they're already, as of I think April 1. Yeah, I think April 1, you can no longer have telehealth, meaning that people who are unable to travel will have to somehow find a way to get to the hospital to get the service they need versus being able to call and tell the doctor your symptoms, which is efficient and effective and useful. But for some reason, Republicans want to get rid of that because they don't care about us. That's the truth. They care about the wealthy. All right, so let's see what the next question is. We want to ask good old ALEC and Google LM. And if you don't use this is a great little product. How does ALEC use state legislators to push corporate-backed policies that might not pass? Let's take a see what it says. I think we have a good answer to what that is. They use a hammer on these guys. Regulatory reform, functional federalism, we talked about that. One thing, I'm not sure where it's going to come, but Chevron deference, that was just overturned in the Supreme Court in the last session. For those who don't know what Chevron deference was, it was a piece of legislation or a policy or something that that they've been using for decades that said that the 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 country will defer to the expert advice of the organizations who are in charge of the policy. So, for example, if you're in the EPA, most likely you have engineers and scientists who know about stuff as it relates to environmental protections. So they know more because they spent their whole life studying those kinds of things than maybe a judge who studied law. But with Chevron deference being struck down, now there is no deference to the state or to the federal agency. It is up to, so they can still do those things, but they know it can get litigated. Before, it wouldn't get litigated; it would just be deferred to the agency. Now it can get litigated. So if you have the money and or contacts, like if you decide to sue in the district in Texas that always has Matthew Kacsmaryk as the judge, you can rest assured that if you sue in that district, then you're going to get Matthew Kacsmaryk, who's going to vote your way. That seems a little underhanded in my humble, unprofessional, non-legal opinion. But that's what Chevron deference is, and lawsuits are piling up, which is what some of the more progressive justices said, that you have essentially opened the floodgates of litigation. So if you have the money now, you can sue any kind of regulation that you don't like, and instead of an administrative law judge deciding for that decision, if there is a case, or them deferring to the experts who know that and say, yeah, having that much what's that, PFAs, I don't know what it stands for, those chemicals, those forever chemicals that are in water, that this level or any level is not healthy for you. Well, now they can't even do that anymore. They can do it, but they can get sued, and it goes to a court, and some judge who knows, who it could be Eileen Cannon for all we know, Matthew Kacsmaryk, or some other corrupt justice a judge who who rules in your favor, because anyone who doesn't think this Republican justice system under Trump, these judges are corrupt and they are often getting paid by the billionaires. So I'm not going to go off of that. All right, let's see. What else do we want to talk about? This is a good one. So just a second. I was not aware of this. The ACC model zoning ordinance to educational startups. I was not aware of this micro or charter schools. We do know that they're trying to completely upend the public education. They want to defund it. So, as we talked about earlier, so that young people don't get the education that they want, and people who are uneducated tend to vote Republican. Now we know that's true. I'm not even going to get into that. And obviously, they want to demonize the woke thing. Everything's woke to them. Woke, 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 because they want to control every aspect of it. Now, remember, this overlaying with the restrictions to Medicaid that we talked about earlier, where they're going to be cutting Medicaid to where that provides services to disabled children. Remember, they're also talking about dismantling the entire Department of Education, which is another organization that is charged with making sure that people with disabilities are not being discriminated against. Now, if they're cutting funding to the schools and they're cutting funding for ability to provide care for services for people with disabilities, and they're getting rid of the ability to have someone advocate for you if you're being discriminated against because of your disability, and you live in a red state, I think you're going to be shit out of luck. That's how I mean, I live in California, so we're not going to be as mean as those red states are. But if they're going to put these limits on even our funds, it's going to be a challenge to be able to maintain the same level of abilities to serve those vulnerable students. So it's a concern of mine. Curriculum control. I can just imagine a whole school completely full of PragerU. I don't know if you're familiar with PragerU. PragerU is that organization that is essentially a education company, and they have all these questionable but accessible. They're well done videos that are like cartoonish at the level of the young people, so that they can indoctrinate them really young. They told people that slavery wasn't so bad, and that slaves learned some good skills. So that's the kind of stuff that they're teaching in Florida, and I think a couple other states have adopted that curriculum. So they want to be able to control that. So imagine an entire country full of PragerUs miseducating our children. And they obviously want to promote more of those education savings accounts and promote alternatives to public schools, because essentially what we said over and over again, they want an uneducated, robotic young population that are not critical thinkers. I think I have beat that to the horse, bit that horse to death. Let's see, what's this question here? I talked about it briefly. Let's see what it's going to say about leveling state legislatures. Voter suppression. I don't think these guys need any more skills in that. They've got it down. They make it so hard to be able to vote that you can't have this ID, you can't have that ID, you can't go on what's that, souls to the polls on Sundays. You can't give somebody water who's sitting in line for 8 hours in Georgia, or it's a felony. Just good gracious. Republicans know they can't win because their policies are so bad. If they ran on what they actually said and didn't lie about everything, just imagine that. Hey, we're going to cut your Medicaid, your Social Security, and your Medicaid, Social Security, and Medicare. We're going to kick disabled children out. We're going to take away foods for poor people. We're going to do, if they told the truth about that, they would never get elected about anything, but they lie about everything. If they said, we're going to defund the schools so that we can indoctrinate your children, that wouldn't get anybody to do. But they have Fox Media and the right wing, Fox News and the right wing media ecosystem of liars. So that's what they do. Let's see. And we talked about ranked choice vote. I'm not going to get into that again. One of the things that I wish I'd thought about that before. One of the things that they talk about in project, it's like a single sentence too, but it says that that once they change the taxes and they plan to make these permanent, this 4.5 trillion cuts in taxes for the wealthy, they plan to make that permanent. But then they say they want to include, and I need to make a note to check on this if it's in this most recent bill. But they said that they want to require a 2/3 supermajority in both houses to change any tax policy. So if they're able to pass this through and put that 2/3 requirement in there in both houses, that's going to effectively make it almost impossible for any future Democratic House, Senate, and president to affect those taxes. I don't put anything past this Republican Party. If you think about what happened most recently, where they canceled the vote, told everybody to go home, and then when Democrats walked out and were starting to go home, they called a secret vote right away, and people are scrambling to try to get back into the House floor to vote. That is unscrupulous, and that's who the Republican Party has become. Let's see. We talked about that. Negative impact on state. Now remember, if all these tax cuts, how are we going to fix our roads? How are we going to pay our 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 bills? How are we going to provide for the emergencies that happen when Florida gets flooded or California gets burned or any of those things happen? How are we going to fund all that? If we're giving all this money to billionaires and they're providing nothing in return, what are we going to do? How are we going to? And I think that's part of the plan, right? Is that they don't want to provide any of that stuff any for us. They don't want to give us any health care. They don't want to give us Medicare, Social Security, or Medi-Cal. They don't want to do any of that stuff. They want to keep their money, take care of their own families, and tell us to pound sand. That's essentially what it is. And they have a move to, and this is at the state level, they want to get rid of the income tax and make it all sales tax. Now, if you are a poor person, you spend a greater percentage of your money buying stuff that you need, groceries, car payments, whatever, just rents, just stuff that you need to leave, all that kind of stuff. So if you're paying a higher tax rate for that, you're paying an inordinate amount more money of your gross income, as opposed to a billionaire who still needs groceries, but it's a percentage of his income is a lot less. Right? So if he's making $1 billion and he's got to go spend $1,000 a week on groceries or $2,000 a week on groceries because they're feeding everybody. I don't know. They have a big family. People. I don't know what it is. But let's say $2,000 a week, $8,000 a month. 8,000 versus $1 billion is a tiny bit. But let's say you are a poor person, you spend $100 a week, $400 a month, and you only get $1,200 a month or $15 a month. Do you see the difference there? And that's why they call sales tax reliance as a regressive tax. It affects the poor among us at a greater percentage of their gross income, and that's why people are against it. Republicans serve the billionaires, and they don't care about the poor, even though they profess to be Christians. But that's another discussion. Let's see. What else do you want to talk about? And we're going to wrap up relatively soon. Let's see. Oh, I should check, see if I have any questions. Gosh, wish I had somebody help me with this. All right, no questions still. All right, let's see. We talked about that one. Hmm. I am not a climate expert. Um, they want to classify nuclear and natural gas as green energy. Okay. They want to continue to promote fossil fuels. That gets me thinking that people reelected Trump. He's dismantling our green energy policies so that these wealthy people can continue to pollute our country, pollute our air, pollute our water. Um, and it's just not enough. They still want more. That's just anyhow, that's upsetting to me. Let's talk about what have been some of the successful things that people have done to fight back against some of this. So let's see what examples are given from these sources. And hopefully it doesn't say no. All right, that's good. So let's cover some of these. Let's end with some positivity, okay? Um, think about Luigi. Highlight the disproportionate benefits to the rich. This is really a war of the haves versus the have-nots. Even though the wealthy are spending all this money trying to gin up all this anger towards trans, immigrants, whoever they're hating for the day, um, it's really not about that because they don't care about any of that kind of stuff. They're not even around people, everyday people. They live in their little million dollar homes and they're not really thinking about it, but they know this gets people riled up, so they use it to distract from the fact that they're ripping you off blind from the other side. So I think part of what we need to do is do a better job of highlighting that it is not a left versus right. It is a have versus the have not. It is a class battle. And the better we get at communicating that, and I know how hard it is to talk to MAGA because they are literally the most arrogant people I've ever met in my life, who will destroy themselves because as long as it doesn't help a black person or immigrant, man, they are cool with it, right? And if it doesn't affect them personally, they don't care about anybody else. We've seen that over and over with what's happening with all these cuts by Elon Musk. Advocate for progressive tax policies, not regressive ones, progressives. I mean, it just makes sense that if you make more money, you should pay more in taxes, right? We should address that whole Social Security thing where I think they only pay on the first $150,000 of their income, but they don't pay anything more after that. Well, why? Why do they get cut off, right? Why don't they keep paying more into Social Security because they're making more money? If you're making $10 million a year, you got to pay an extra few thousand, whatever it turns out to be. It's helping people. To me, it's a simple choice, but I just don't understand that whole greed. But it is what it is. We need to expose the impact on public service. That's what I was just talking about. If these goes these things go through and they cut their own taxes, they cut the deregulation, so we're eating contaminated food, drinking contaminated water, not even finding out about it because Trump and his goons have essentially made it illegal for our agencies to talk to us about anything. Um, we're really being blind to much. We need to promote clean energy, oppose deregulation just for they're opposed to all regulation. So things that keep us safe, we should be opposed to those things. We should want them to have regulations over our food and our water, right, and our medicines, right? We don't want to become guinea pigs. And I don't care what people's thoughts are on this. People have all benefited from the work and sacrifice of unions and workers, right? Your everyday workers who got the 40-hour work week, who got the vacation pay, who got the 8-hour day, who got women's ability to have, um, you know, to take time off for the birth of their baby. And I think even men too, in some cases. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert in this stuff. Um, that's all came from unions and the sacrifices they made. We need to defend public education because these charter schools, these religious schools, they don't have the same requirements that our public schools have, and they don't have the same requirements in terms of anti-discrimination or whatever. So they can essentially say, I don't want that student, I don't want that student, I don't want that student. And not everybody's going to have the ability to pay for these schools, because when they started getting these educational savings vouchers, all these schools did is start raising their tuition. They said, "Oh, you're getting $7,000. We're going to just increase our tuition by $7,000." So all that extra money goes directly to the school, and the poorer person who doesn't have the ability to have their kids go to private school is in a public school with less money, larger class sizes, and dissatisfied teachers with these larger class sizes. It's just too much. Promote fair elections. That seems pretty simple. Um, they have this new SAVE Act now by Republicans. The SAVE Act is their attempt to handle uh, immigrants voting, which is not a thing, but they claim it is. But really, it is putting an onerous requirement on people to prove their identity. And it's really going to be a challenge for women who have changed their name to when they got married. So to be able to vote according to the SAVE Act, which they're going to probably push through, you have to have proof of who you are, and it has to match up with your birth name. I mean, you have to show how you switch from Jane Smith to Jane Johnson, right? And you need original documentation. So it's not as simple as going to vote any longer. It's going to be a big onerous additional task, and they're doing that on purpose. There's going to be people who are not able to meet that, or are going to wait until the last minute, and it's going to be too late for them to vote, because they don't really want women to be able to vote. They want to. They made it clear. They've said it over and over again. You have to believe them when they say that. Protect donor privacy. I don't agree with that. That's one of their things. They say they want to protect donor privacy so that their donors can fund these efforts without being known that they're funding these efforts. That is horrific. We need to make that donor privacy is available for us, so we know who's making these donations for these hideous policies. They hide behind the anonymity as opposed to being proud of their actions. So it's easy to donate $1 million for some cause that no one's going to know you're doing secretly, and not have to pay the price. So you don't have to worry about getting boycotted or being ostracized by your friends and family because they know that you supported this horrendous, horrific policy. They want to keep that secret. And I think that one of the strategies we should have is require that all be disclosed, so we know who's funding what and who it's affecting. We need to promote digital privacy, and that's going to be really important going up, because with Elon Musk all in our government databases and Social Security Department, Treasury Department, that's going to be a problem. So we need some legislation to help protect against and to protect our digital privacy. And then we need to get more involved at the state and local levels, right? I mean, Democrats have traditionally come around on presidential elections. We usually sit out in midterms. It's gotten better over the last couple sessions, but we need to pay attention, because every single time Republicans have the ability to lock down a state because they have control of the governorship and the two houses of government, they lock it down. Perfect example is Louisiana. I think his name's Landry, won the governorship over the Democrat. It was a Democratic governor before, which stopped the worst things of Louisianians, if that's how you pronounce it. But when they controlled all levers of government, now they're doing some of the worst things. And Louisiana is on its downward trend to oblivion, like the rest of the Republican-led states who destroy themselves. West Virginia's, Alabama's, Mississippi's, etc. So anyhow, I'm done rambling on. It's been about an hour. I'll take one quick look. If you're still there and you have any questions, ask now or forever hold your peace. But let's see. Okay. So thank you for joining us, and who's watching this live or who's watching it after the fact. I do appreciate you being here, and we will see you in the next episode.